So this is Matt's selection. I mentioned the Radiohead heavy supergroup. So that's the Smile with Wall of Eyes. Carl, I'm gonna hand over to you to kick things off.
Yeah, so this is one that I'm I'm still quite torn on. I'm still not completely sure how I feel. Um, so yeah, I mean, Radiohead, what obviously one of my favorite artists, which I'm sure is the case for a lot of music fans. Um, so yeah, when the Smiles debut dropped, it was like fantastic. First new music since Shane Pool, um, which obviously came out in 2016. Smiles debut came out 2022, so a fair gap between the last Radiohead album and the first from this side project. And it was very much a case of, it's a side project. We're going to get something different, something exciting. And then when it first arrived, I remember talking to you about it, Kylie, and I was like initially disappointed as it just sounded like any Radiohead project, which obviously isn't a bad thing, but because I built it up in my head, if it's a side project, to me, I automatically think different. Um, but once I kind of got over that, kept going back to it, and eventually came to quite enjoy that debut. It finished in my top 20 for the year, and there were some incredible tracks on there that are as good as anything Radiohead um, have released in the last decade or so. Obviously, Panavision, Skirting on the Surface, all the singles on there are just fantastic. Um, so yeah, onto this album then, and I initially wasn't taken with any of the singles, Bending Hectic or Wall of Eyes. I'll go back onto Bending Hectic shortly, but I wasn't initially taken with either of those. But once I saw the reviews start coming in for the album, you know, again we talk about the hype machine. It was all, oh yeah, it's this amazing blend of prog, jazz, really experimental record. I was seeing lots of 10 out of 10 reviews, lots of 5-star reviews, um, great reviews galore. And so I've gone in ready to be blown away again. And they've basically, once again, just given me a Radiohead album. Only this time, I'd say the highs aren't as frequent or necessarily as high as they were on the Smiles debut. I'm still contemplating that, but definitely not as frequent, I would say. So yeah, it was kind of a situation where I was expecting OK Computer and basically got maybe an Atoms for Peace or a Tom York solo record instead. So once again, the music press and their hype machine has let me down, I think, with this one. But yeah, I mean, that said, I still like Atoms for Peace. I still like Tom York solo stuff. So I think once I got over that initial disappointment again, there is a lot that I'm really loving here. Firstly, I mentioned Bending Hectic. I can't believe I didn't take to that song straight away. Absolutely phenomenal track. Maybe because it was like a single that was 8 minutes, it just didn't click, or I didn't have the patience for it at the time. But here on the record, in the context of when it arrives on the record as well, I think it's a whole other beast. Just masterful. The way it builds, the guitars, just brilliant. Teleharmonic is the other kind of top tier moment for me. Again, Teleharmonic is like, again, it's just like a Radiohead track. You got Tom's ethereal vocals, those trippy electronics, you know, just hook it to my veins. Stunning track. And then the other ones that I really like, I Quit, with that stuttering kind of whirring sound that runs through the song. Um, Again, just really love that one. And then the final track, You Know Me, at the end, I think ties it up really well. Coming after Bending Hectic as well, you kind of needed something strong to follow that if you're going to have anything follow that, and I think that fits the bill. Um, so yeah, there's half of it that I really like, and then outside of those four, the others still aren't quite doing it for me yet. Wall of Eyes is still, it just sounds a bit uninspired to me. The middle section of as well, they've since released those as singles. I've not really warmed to them either. I kind of find myself, Teleharmonic comes on, it's like I want more of that, and then it kind of goes off into these other tracks that just don't kind of hit me like that track does. And then it's not until the back half that I find myself kind of getting re-engaged with what I'm being presented with. So yeah, it's very much an album of two halves. I could see this one maybe growing on me like the debut did, but yeah, I think it's one where the highs are, quite exceptional and probably as good as we've come to expect from Radiohead. Certainly, in the last decade anyway. But yeah, it's one that I'm finding new things the more I listen to it, but I don't think I'll come to love it as much as I do the Smiles debut, or indeed, some of the better Radiohead albums. But there's definitely, moments like Teleharmonic, Bending Hectic definitely make it worthwhile for me. But once again, just minimize your expectations when it comes to the reviews, I'd say, with this one.
Kylie, I think you had a bit of trepidation about this selection, and what was it you described it as? It might be a circle jerk when it comes to reviewing this. So, are you aroused?
In similar ways to Karl.
Leave that in there. Leave it in there.
Yeah, I mean, since I don't think, who knows if we'll ever review a Radiohead album, because they seem to kind of be on yes or no hiatus. And but just quickly, Radiohead was kind of, when I was figuring out my own stuff still, OK Computer came out, and I'd known them, through Creep and Street Spirit off the Bins, and but it was the Paranoid Android music video at like 2:00 in the morning on MTV2 that I was fairly young and was like, wow, this is really something else. And I went to the store and picked up OK Computer and listened to it a few times. And this was back when you could return CDs. So I took it back and I exchanged it for The Offspring's Ixnay on the Hombre. And it's just one of those things that I continue to laugh about as you're figuring out your way in what kind of music you like, because I did enjoy Ixnay on the Hombre, but I remember a couple of days later I was thinking, I think you need to own that OK Computer record. And that really set me off through high school and college. I was one of those top tier annoying Radiohead fans, and that and Kid A, just fantastic. But I've kind of fallen in the I think In Rainbows was the last really great Radiohead related thing. And I was not a fan of the Smile debut, because kind of the similar expectations that you were wanting something else. I think especially, we say Tom York, Johnny Greenwood, Tom York, Johnny Greenwood, but like there's also Tom Skinner on drums. And in the meantime, since In Rainbows, I've found all of the Sons of Kemet projects more interesting than anything Radiohead's doing. And kind of felt like he was underutilized on that first record. And again, I feel like he's underutilized on Wall of Eyes. This is definitely, there are moments that remind me of Tom York's Anima album from a couple of years ago that I enjoyed. All right, but I'm just not, I think Kid A was like the perfect blend of Radiohead, of their old alternative sound and the experimental electronic thing that they were going for. And they just haven't, for me, found that sweet spot again. I'm with you. I think Wall of Eyes is just a wet fart to start this record, and kind of, multiple false starts with this thing because of that. But, get past that, and Teleharmonic is, I think, probably my favorite Radiohead related song since In Rainbows. I'm not going to take any more from what Karl said about it, because I think it's just, when I hear Tom York and Johnny Greenwood and they nail it like that, you just can't beat it. And then I Quit is the other one that I really like, and Bending Hectic, same thing. When it came out as the single, I was again just like, oh, here we go again. And I still feel like it should be like the last song on this album, but that sense of dread in Johnny Greenwood's string arrangements that he usually, saves for his film scores. The last few minutes of that song, it just feels like you're in a slow motion car crash or something like that. That it's unnerving, but once you hit the other side of it and that kind of relief, it's just brilliant in the way that, those two can be. And so, that's definitely my highlights. Under Our Pillows, kind of, I noted, sounds like Hail to the Thief, which for me isn't necessarily a favorite record of theirs. I know a lot of people really like that one, but just doesn't do it for me. And so I listened to this a few times, and I know I'd said some things in our group chat that I described it as masturbatory, and I still think it kind of is. But last week I finally, it's one of those albums I was always doing something else, working and listening to it, and just couldn't get into it. And last week I sat down and, had a little bit of a J and just sat in my office and listened to the whole thing straight through, and really came to appreciate it more so, I think, than I did the first few weeks it was out. And so some really great highs, but overall still not 100% getting my attention. And just to reiterate what Karl said, I think it is critical reactions and the Radiohead fandom reactions to any new thing that any of these guys put out, except for Phil Selway's solo album last year, which no one talked about, which it wasn't great. But I think that's kind of what turns me off of their projects in the last 10 years, is just this expectations that come with it. And, this is probably, I would imagine, going to end up on a lot of top of year-end lists, even with 11 months to go, because that's just kind of how things operate for them, and critical consensus. And if you get rid of that, I enjoyed it, but it doesn't, the accolades that this thing is getting, I don't think are necessarily warranted.
Speaking of which, today I saw that Mojo magazine, and the date is February the 12th, we're recording, their best albums of 2024 so far. I was like, wow. And so, yeah, this was on there. And yeah, as was Brittany Howard, another one which could have made it for next month's pod. Sleater Kinney, which has had, so-so reviews, but Mojo seems to like it. And then there was Yakida, which is the Bill Ryder Jones record, which again is one I'd like to get into. So that was on there. And I think the thing which struck me from their very short review of this album was needs repeated listens. And unfortunately, I've not been able to give it as many repeated listens as I think it needs. So I do feel like my sort of summary is a little bit half-baked, which perhaps is apt. I don't know. My current kind of summary of it, which is that it flatters to deceive and feels like it should be more majestic and hard hitting than it is. And I think actually, if I did listen to it more, I think it would start to permeate in such a way that I would be, maybe not as high as others might give it, but certainly higher score than I have for this pod. So yeah, I'm the Radiohead novice of the pod. I know the singles, albums less so, and that is, it's an embarrassing blot on my book. But there we go. And yeah, giving this an opportunity is interesting to me to listen to a full album with Tom York and Johnny Greenwood, and then Tom Skinner on drums, who again, Sons of Kemet, not too familiar with, apart from knowing they're one of the kind of new jazz kind of rising stars of the UK. And interesting because Wall of Eyes as well as a single didn't really resonate, but actually on the album, and maybe it's because it's somehow through my subconscious, but it does when listening on these few listens I've been able to give it, and reminded me of The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, which have a similar kind of, when you're in the zone with them as a band, can be very good, but then they don't have that ability that you're jumping to listen back to. And whilst I think Wall of Ice is a great single, it's not one which I'm rushing to listen to again and again. Read the Room was the other main highlight for me of this. I thought that the vocals were quite Jeff Buckley-like. It reminded me a bit of this British band called Your Code Name is Milo from quite a few years back, and how it was all arranged. Quite synthy, ominous, and seems to be about the business of music and how it can drain enthusiasm from the art. So, probably apt for someone as lauded as Tom York and Radiohead are. And then Bending Hectic, already been referred to, and yeah, I just think that's cinematic as well, and really it kind of pays back the patience required to engage with that song, and a really, really lovely soulful chorus as well, and I just love the line, "If you've got something to say it now," which seems to sort of divert from a lot of the more cynical lyrics on this album, which come across. But yeah, aside from that, none of the others sort of Teleharmonic hasn't hit with me, which I think, again, if I'd given more listens, maybe it would, like probably all of them. But at this stage, those are the three which really stand out, and I can only say that this is one which hasn't hit the heights which I was open to and thought might hit on this kind of first full kind of Radiohead-esque album. So broadly similar to you guys, but without the background